Ivy League educated Edith Piaf. Please join me in welcoming Mira Strejka.
Yeah.
fundraiser, janitor, everything else. And as David can attest, former editors of the magazine, myself included, are fond of looking back on their tenures and calling them the best jobs they ever had. When you're at the helm of it, fielding calls, complaints, friendly suggestions from Hillel directors, fundamentalist Christian Zionists. That was a recent one.
That was my week.
That was last week, yes. Donors, God forbid, former donors, while trying to recruit and train student writers, advertise the magazine, pay bills, try to pay ourselves. It can be hard to appreciate and remember what a special organization you're running and what a unique time of your life you are spending doing it. So we're here tonight to not just remind David to appreciate his youth and his job, but he should. But also to remind ourselves why independent Jewish journalism by students is important, and also to honor another David, who's David Twersky, who co-founded the Jewish Student Press Service in 1970. We have some other founders with us. So yes to David Twersky. And other founders from that era, please make yourselves known. Yes. So a round of applause to David Twersky very tragically passed away recently, and we have some of his family and friends in the room to honor him also. And we're also honoring Sandy Edry, who founded New Voices magazine 20 years later. So there's a 40-20. So you'll hear much more about David Twersky from his family and former friends and coworkers, and also more about Sandy. But I'll just say a word quickly about why I think that Jewish Student Press Service and New Voices magazine are important enough for me to join the board 5 years after finishing my tenure as editor. As an undergraduate at Harvard, and more recently as a graduate student at the University of Michigan, I've seen how the very success of important institutions like Hillel, Chabad, even Birthright Israel can have the unfortunate effect of making young Jews feel like they can just sit back and let organizational leaders make decisions about their communities and their lives. And JSPS and New Voices are truly unique outlets for Jewish students to explore their identities, communities, politics, religious practice on their own terms, to be critical if they see fit, to be celebratory, and to find others who are similarly engaged. And at the same time, of course, to gain valuable journalistic mentorship and exposure. Former artists and writers of mine just in my 2 years have gone on already to write for NPR, Reuters, AP, The Atlantic, The Nation, US News and World Report, PRI, The Forward, The Jewish Week, Tablet, and others like that. There were many times during my tenure that we weren't sure if we would have the chance to train more writers, not to mention see another paycheck ourselves. So we're here tonight to voice our support for the publication and its mission, and to make sure the current David and his successors don't starve. And now join me in welcoming J.J. Goldberg. Thank you.
I first want to take note of Sandy Edry, who did not get traded by the Red Sox to the White Sox, even though he looks like it. Terrible move. It's kind of hard to be here. We're talking about the memory of somebody who was a very real, living presence for a very long time. I kind of still have a hard time talking about it. It's been almost exactly 2 years now since he passed away. And I wrote about it at the time, kind of in the heat of the thing. It had been 45 years, almost to the week, since we met at a summer camp jamboree in Pennsylvania. I was going to camp in Maryland, he was going to camp in New York, Halloween camp, and we just clicked on the lawn. It was the weirdest thing. And 45 years later, he was gone. With some ups and downs. But I know that he's touched a lot of lives along the way as strongly, in some cases more strongly. His daughter Anna's here. His son Michael couldn't be here because he's in Tel Aviv, kind of following David's footsteps and learning where his father had been. Some of what happened over the years and the impact that he had, especially on this organization, Jewish Student Press Service, you can get from a video that is showing down the hall where David Kaufman, who with David Twersky created the press service 40 years ago, talks about his memories of those early days and some of the amazing experiences. Marty Salowitz, who was actually running the organization in the office back then, he was our boss and guru, came tonight. He could probably tell you even more if you catch him later on. I will tell you one thing, which is that Marty and David went to Yankee Stadium representing the Jewish Student Press Service to interview Ron Blumberg, who had just signed on with the Yankees. Wasn't it? And they asked, I guess it was David asked him what it felt like to be the first DH in history. And he said, "I'm very proud to be the first designated Hebrew." Which later became the title of his autobiography. I want to yield the stage at this point to Mark Seal, who is going to talk about David and read a letter from Bradley Burston, who in the days of the Jewish Student Press Service was known as the Gestetner Rebbe. He was circulating around the country with a station wagon full of literature about the range of Jewish experiences available to young Jews on campus. So, Mark, why don't you come up and read what Bradley has to say? I'll tell you more.
David, first of all, I guess it's important to say that I only knew David for 40 years. I bow to JJ, but Margot Bloom, my partner, is related to David's stepmother, so perhaps I trump. I was also going to talk about the Yankee story because the kid Sally is here, but I think it's really important to note that the Yankees are in first place, and that somehow Cosmos has lined up for this evening for David. I don't think a week goes by where I don't think about David, I don't remember David, and particularly every time the Yankees win. I feel it very strongly. David is sort of an extraordinary privilege to have been a close friend of the first team. I feel that loss. My daughter Molly called and she said, if this event would have been in New Jersey, she would have loved to come. She just couldn't make it because she loved David as well. A number of people, mostly from Israel, sent really nice notes expressing their regrets for not being able to participate in the Jewish agency meetings or just day-to-day life. Bruce Arbit, Lady Kelman, Rabbi Miri Gold, who is very much in the news now, a friend of ours from Kibbutz Gezer. But Brad Burston, who is a very good friend of ours from Kibbutz Gezer, and is senior editor of Haaretz.com and a columnist, decided to share something that I found particularly moving and particularly profound. And talked to Mick and JJ, and we decided to include it in the evening. A few lines while feeling bad that I can't be with you for this. When the Jewish Student Press Service was new, it was a certain act of honor to send messages like this in a telegram. So I'm asking David, who I am certain is with you now, to imagine this to have come via Western Union, and to know that it comes with every ounce of the urgency of longing and the deep love that a telegram used to convey. David Twersky changed lives, ours and those of people all over the world. David Twersky changed minds. David Twersky changed everyone he met. We are all of us better people, fuller people, for having been in his world. David was an editor of Uncommon Vision. He was also my favorite poet. For a person of disarming, almost supernatural openness, there was something unreachable about David that had to do with his taking in everything around him and responding in ways that were beyond anybody's ability to predict. He had a sense about people and ideas and events that could go somewhere no one else would go. And he would take you with him. He would have been the first to say that every person is replaceable. But David Twersky was simply irreplaceable. We love you, David. We miss you more than we can say. You changed the world, and you made it a better place for all of us to be.
I am going to hand over the microphone to Anna, speaking for her family. But before I do, I just want to say a few words. There are moments of transition. I think Sandy knows this better than most people because he inherited something that had been a network of campus newspapers and became a magazine. It adopted a different role. I think it was very unclear at that moment what the role would be. It was part of Sandy's vision that it became something essential even after what it originally had been was no longer essential. And I remember at the very beginning when the first rendition came into being. And I remember because Phil Horn, who's over here now, who was working at the Jewish Agency back then, at the World Zionist Organization, we all thought we were being spontaneous. We thought we created a campus movement out of thin air because of the atmosphere of the post-67 campus. It wasn't until I read Shogun years later that I realized that somebody could be sitting behind the scenes, I wouldn't say manipulating us, but guiding us.
Interesting conversation about how we wanted to do this event, if it would be here. And, I had a conversation with Sandy, who's our second honoree tonight, and was really excited to have the chance to say a few words about Sandy and his legacy. My name is Mick Moore. I'm current president of the board of the Jewish Student Press Service, and from 1996 to 1998, I was the director of the press service and the editor of New Voices. And that was the first time that I met Sandy. He had been editor, a couple editors before me, but had stayed involved and stayed in touch, which is really, for those of you who know the press service, is very common. And I didn't get a chance to know Sandy that well, more so recently. He very generously joined the board over the last year or so, and has become an incredible source of support for both me as board chair, but also for David, who's our editor. And what I really wanted to say about Sandy, there are those of you who were who remember when New Voices was founded. The period right before New Voices was founded was really a critical period for the organization. Basically, what had happened, Larry Edelson, who couldn't be here tonight, was the editor in the late 80s, and when Larry left his job, as was tradition, right, no editor stayed more than a couple of years, so that it was always students or recent graduates who were really running the organization, something very unique. Larry hired someone, and according to Larry, this editor, instead of being a faithful steward of the tiny budget, of the organization, he blew it all on long-distance phone calls to England, which apparently you could do back in those days. You don't hear stories of anyone blowing lots of money on long-distance calls anymore, since we have Skype and such. But it was a serious matter because the organization then had no money. It was a small organization to start with, but it also had lost its sort of core constituency. Back when David and others had started the press service, there were hundreds, literally hundreds of campus newspapers, and when Sandy came along after having done this on his campus, there were many, many fewer Jewish campus publications, and the rationale for having a press service or having a wire service was kind of lost along with the money. And what Sandy did was he basically saw and understood the legacy of the organization, and he essentially put himself forward and said, I don't want this to die. I have a vision for how this organization can keep going. And despite the fact that there was no money, there was also no staff, right? There was no board, right? There was the history, and there was the North American Jewish Students Appeal. Sandy came in and said, we're going to turn this wire service into a magazine, and he created New Voices.
And JTA provided free rent and utilities.
Don't worry about it.
That's right, and I remember having gone to JTA and seeing the cubicle that was the New Voices office. So, without belaboring the point, if you were an editor or writer for New Voices, raise your hand. So that's a small... It's a small handful of literally the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of students who only had an opportunity to write for New Voices because Sandy decided to do what he wanted to do. Looking back on those 2 years of my life, the truth is, I had run a Jewish magazine when I was in college, and I felt like there was no more perfect job for me than being the director of the Jewish Student Press Service and editing New Voices. And if Sandy hadn't come along, I never would have had my job, and Sam never would have had his, and Daniel never would have had his, and Josh never would have had his, and Alana never would have had hers, and all of the writers that we got to work with, and all of the experience and responsibility that we shouldered, and really I think the people who we became is in no small part due to Sandy's work. So Sandy, if you'll come up and accept this honor.
This is quite a hard act to follow. I'm going to try to keep this as brief as possible. The funny thing is, in preparation for tonight, I don't think I have been more nervous than I've been probably in the last 20 years since I was doing it. And I couldn't, for a while, I couldn't figure out why. What was it about you people that made me so nervous back then and that still make me nervous now? Stop it. Really. But finally, on the way over here, it sort of dawned on me what happened. As Mick said, when I took over the press service, this was already a point where it had seen its better days. Right? I had just come from leading basically the dissolution of the North American Jewish Students Network, and had then taken over this role because there were a handful of people at the Appeal, Adam Dichter, a couple of people like Larry Kohler in the back, who really sort of kept the organization afloat during that timing. And then when I came on, they handed it over and said, here. And I didn't really have, at the time, a very large cohort. It was a very different time period. And I remember this very clearly as I was thinking about it. I was actually, for those years, I was so jealous of all of you. I was so jealous of JJ and Mark and David and everybody like that because you guys came around in this time and period where you had this shared sense of spirit, these goals, this purpose, and you had each other. And the reality is, in the early 1990s, that just wasn't there. So to a certain extent, all of you became my cohort in absentia. You were the people that I used to guide me. It was your spirit that sort of, even though, honestly, to be honest, many of you didn't even want to talk to me back then. Because you were burned by the press service, you were on with your own lives at that point. It was a different world, and press service just wasn't a priority at that point. So, but even that, know that you guys were with me every step of the way there. And it was that spirit that helped me basically come to decide to do New Voices. And I've never had the chance to really thank all of you for that. And tonight's my chance to actually say thank you. So, thank you.
Usually these are unwrapped in advance, but we're winging it a little bit. So the board on which you serve, behind your back, decided to go out and get you this, which I will now open. And so this is the very first issue of the book. And it says, the inscription on the bottom says, "To Sandy, for giving us 20 years of New Voices," and it has the date, and it's from us, the JSPS Board of Directors.
Thanks so much, Sandy and Mick. And now Janet Keener, board member extraordinaire, longtime wonderful supporter of the magazine and the organization, and we owe all of our dinner and drinks to her. So, thank you, Janet. If more people want chairs, feel free to, come forward and take them. It's not rude.
But I'll try not to talk too long. I'm Janet Keener, and I guess my claim to fame tonight is I'm not a former editor or administrator or director of either JSPS or New Voices. But I am the wife of a former editor. It is overrated. And I can't quite remember or figure out how I ended up on board of JSPS. It's been a while, but I think it had something to do with Nick asking Peter to do something, and somehow I ended up being the one who did it, or something like that. In any event, here I am, and I've been watching JSPS for quite some time, and it's an amazing experience. Now I'm going to say something that's really rather unusual, I think, and maybe unique for a major fundraising event. And though this may not seem like you, but for JSPS and New Voices, as well as being an occasion to honor our past, this is our idea of major fundraising. So what I would say that's a little unusual is that the last thing I would want tonight would be for us to raise hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I'm not just saying it because I know we won't, which I do. But through the years, I've met with new editors and administrators as they started, directors, and some of them have had great dreams of huge budgets and what they were going to do with it. And each time I looked at them and I said, that's the last thing you need. And I said, because really, I think one of the greatest achievements of JSPS and New Voices is its ongoing role as an incubator for independent Jewish journalists and for very talented professionals working in the Jewish world. We hire talented people right out of college. We hand them a very small sum of money, and we tell them to find good writers, assign great stories, edit the work, and by the way, pay the rent, the utilities, the insurance, buy the supplies, and hopefully, if it's good, be able to pay your own salaries on time. And when the sum of money left over from that raised by your predecessor is gone, which, believe me, is pretty quickly, go out and raise more. The miracle is that for 40 years, they've been doing it. And I believe that figuring out how to make that all happen is one of the great experiences offered by the organization. And if we were handing these new editors and administrators hundreds of thousands of dollars rather than the meager tens, we, the grown-ups, would probably be not capable of the hands-off policy. The professionals that leave us at the end of their tenure wouldn't have learned that when they publish an amazing investigative piece that steps on the toes of either an individual or the entire Jewish establishment, they may have to find new sources of funding, or figure out which building can carry the largest, or how to live on plain spaghetti and tomato sauce. I think these are great lessons. So, that being said, don't want hundreds of thousands. What do I want today? Well, I think that I heard our goal, or we set our goal for this event as $15,000. That being said, however, I would love to see a bit more. In years past, we had 2 full-time staff members, an editor, an administrator, or a director, or some permutations of those titles. For the last few years, we've been down to 1 full-time person, and I think that's rather a shame. Not only doesn't it allow the experience of working together and creative cross-pollination, but it means that every year we are sending out 1 fewer trained Jewish professional. I think that's really unfortunate. I would love tonight to see us raise, I don't know, maybe $50,000, so as to be able to hire another full-time staff person. Don't ask, $50,000 is not the salary of a full-time staff person. That's the salary of a full-time staff person, maybe with the $15,000 that was going to cover the other stuff. So don't get distracted. It's really minuscule. That may be totally fantasy. However, it would be really great if here in this room we would all think about the role that JSPS New Voices has played in our life, either directly by working or writing for it, or indirectly through the impact of the work of so many people who had their early trial by fire within our organization. Think about it as we pull out our checkbooks. What's great about giving to JSPS is that donations that for some organizations are insignificant are for us the major ones that have kept us going for over 40 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Janet. I echo everything you said. That was beautiful. Thanks. And David Walensky, our current sole employee of JSPS New Voices.
What Sandy said about being jealous of the sort of original, the back in the day crew, as I think of them. Yeah, I feel that a lot. I wasn't going to use the word jealousy. There are times when I feel like I have a very lonely job. I work, in an office full of people. It's not a cubicle at JTA anymore, it's a cubicle at the Forward. There are Jewish journalists around. I feel like there's some sort of common purpose with the people around me, but there's no one else who works for the press service and who works for New Voices around all the time. It can be a very lonely job. And so I'm not just saying this because I want you to do what Janet just asked you to do. I really mean this. I love meeting you guys. I love getting a phone call from someone out of the blue or an email out of the blue. I had this great phone conversation with David Kaufman a few weeks ago. And it's great because it gives me this sense that there's some sort of continuity to this, that I'm not just doing this alone. There's this whole core of people behind me historically in spirit. And, you know, in terms of David Twersky, right, obviously I never met him, but it's in the same vein as what I was just saying. It's great to hear about him, just to hear about those days of the organization. It makes me feel like, it makes me less lonely, and it makes me feel like it's worth going to the office tomorrow and editing something or sending a letter to some foundation or whatever it is that I have to do tomorrow. And it's usually all of the above. Things have changed. You know, Sandy turned it from a press service into a magazine, and a few, I guess, almost 3 years ago now, we turned it from a print magazine into an all-online magazine. You can't pick it up on the coffee table of the Hillel anymore, and so that has posed a whole new challenge for us in terms of how do we reach readers. So we're in a moment of transition again, as we were when Sandy came in. But the more things change, the more they stay the same. If you take a look at the framed print of the cover of the first issue that we just gave Sandy, the cover story, Sandy, can you read the headline of the cover story?
Oh, look at the CJF population survey.
Oh, look at the CJF population survey. So Sandy didn't know that we did this, but he sent over to me his copy of the first issue. I told him because we wanted to show it to people at this.
And it was Phil and it was Marla Baron in Jerusalem who were doing that. And it was David, along with Yitzhak Epstein, who's here, and Marty Salowitz, and geez, I don't know if I can mention everybody, but people who had the vision to seize that moment. David, I don't know why it was, I don't remember what it was that created the feeling, but it always felt like he was the best of us. He was the one that people looked to when we were 17, we were 18 at the time. And he had the right word at the right moment. He knew where we were going before the rest of us did, or he could say it even when the rest of us didn't have the words for it. Years later, when we were on Kibbutz Gezer, and he was sent from the kibbutz to work first in the Labor Party and then as a legislative aide in the Knesset. We all had the feeling that if he'd stayed, he would have ended up in the Knesset. He had that way of articulating a certain moment, and growing up in the Bronx in an immigrant socialist community, in the Sholem Aleichem houses, and then going through the experience of City College, back when it was the famous City College, and then moving to kibbutz right after the Six-Day War, and being part of a group that, as early as 1967 or 68 or 69 when we organized, refused to go to the West Bank, refused to go to the Golan. We said, it's going to go back one of these days. He always saw 3 steps ahead. He always saw 3 steps ahead. Years later, when he was working at the American Jewish Congress toward the end of his career, and he was carrying on back-channel negotiations with Pervez Musharraf, the dictator of Pakistan, to try and create some breakthroughs to the Muslim world. He brought Musharraf to New York to speak to a gathering of Jewish community leaders. Other people couldn't have done that. He had that vision. He had that way of seeing what was next. And at the same time, he was funny. He was crazy. He was a poet. He was a prankster. He didn't know where he was going to show up. He was probably the horniest guy I ever met. And saying this knowing that Jenny's here in the audience, and so I probably shouldn't be saying this.
And so is Anna.
Anna, you should know about this. Jenny, you shouldn't have known about it.
Things I never need to know about.
Nobody. There were many things I was jealous of David about. None more than his skills in that field. But let's move on.
But you digress.
Having set the stage.
But you digress, JJ.
May you rest in peace. I want to call up Anna.
On that note.
Talk about what it was like growing up with this.
Well, thanks for that, JJ. from my world, which is digital advertising, was that you guys are going to have a hard time competing with the Japan Society for the Promotion of Science. So I wish you good luck on that, first of all, because everybody goes to those URLs. As I read more into this, I could picture one photo that we had in our house of my dad protesting when he was about my age. And I used to make fun of him, saying that those were the days when he had long hair and big dreams. But in reality, my dad was a fighter his entire life, with everything. And I believe that started here, a platform that allowed him to voice his opinion on matters he believed in most. He'd be so happy to see how far it has come in these 40 years, and excited to see what you all do with it in the next 40. My dad was a lover of many things, as JJ pointed out. Besides for those things, his family, his friends, red meat, the occasional Lifetime for Women movie, and his writing. He was lucky when it came to his profession. He always knew what he wanted to do, what he believed in, and he was an amazing writer, devoted to his career, to the Jewish people, and of course to Israel. I think this organization helped him greatly in becoming who he was, and for that I am forever thankful. Events like this are a reminder that a part of him still lives on through his work and his legacy. On behalf of my family and I want to thank you all so much for having us and for honoring my dad.
So the board and staff of the Jewish Student Press Service wanted to give you something to remember both this evening and your father's role in leadership at the Jewish Student Press Service. And since you mentioned photographs of your father with long hair, there's a description at the bottom that says in memory of David Twersky, co-founder of the Jewish Student Press Service. And it's the photo that we have on the invitation that you can also see in the back.
Thank you, JJ, Anna, and Nick. If you have not gotten enough of JJ's unique perspective, you can read more of him on the path forward. So I recommend that you do so. And thank you, Nick, president of our board. And I'd now like to introduce Sandy Edry, our, oh no, I'm sorry, I'm introducing Mick. Yeah.